Well, good morning. Nice to see everybody here. This is wonderful. I think it's better to open even if only a few of us feel comfortable coming than to keep closed, don't you? Good. Well, I hope that you have all had some time this week to think about and reflect on the July 4th lesson about freedom, unity, and in God we trust. Have any of you had a chance to really think about that this week? Wonderful. All right. These are three of the fundamental ideas, of course, of unity and our great country. At Unity, we're not much on dogma and rituals, as you know, but it's just smart to benefit from the opportunities like Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter and 4th of July. We can let these traditions serve us, not rule or restrict us, but to serve as special reminders. Christmas trees, Thanksgiving meals, Easter eggs, the fireworks on the 4th of July can all remind us of truths that we hold dear. I personally like outer rituals because outer rituals remind my inner self of goals in a way that just thinking about them really can't do for me. Maybe that's a leftover from my old Episcopalian upbringing, I don't know. But however you remind yourself of your spiritual goals, whether it's writing on your hand maybe, like my students do, or note cards on your bathroom mirror, I hope you can find ways to remember the important ideas on a daily basis of the unity of all life, our inner freedom from negativity and fears, for example, and the motto, in God we trust. I'd like to talk more deeply today about the idea of our great country's motto, in God we trust. Why would we do that instead of following the latest fads about what's important in life? Because if we trust in the primordial essence of the universe, these eternal laws, they will help us access a different level of existence, which leads to joy and peace and abundance on all levels. They make our lives run smoother. In God we trust means that we don't put our trust in our egos. Egos usually follow the latest moral or ethical fad. Egos believe that money, power, prestige, and materialism and being separate from other people will make us happy. The ego believes in the seen world of materialism and not the unseen world that St. Paul called the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm can't be seen any more than a sound wave or quantum energy can be seen, but they can be made manifest in the material world. We see them as love and goodness, purity, compassion, forgiveness, peace, for example. As above, so below. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Manifesting the kingdom of heaven on earth is a very real state to those who are open to it. A part of that unseen world is the eternal laws, we call them, which, when observed, help us navigate the relative plane much more easily. Excuse me. When we observe these unseen laws that spiritual teachers and mystics have forever shared with us, we are more easily able to manifest heaven on earth and not hell and suffering on earth. These eternal laws, like practicing love, forgiveness, compassion, are similar to earthly laws, which help life run smoother for everyone. One example comes to my mind. It's the traffic situation that the French used to deal with a few decades ago. The French called on some American traffic experts trying to find out how to deal with all these swerving, speeding cars in Paris. Now, if any of you ever tried to cross on foot the 8-lane traffic circle that goes around the Arc de Triomphe before about 1980, you know exactly what I mean. Actually, I doubt that anyone who ever tried that survived to even be here today. This is a huge traffic circle. It's still there, of course, the width of about 8 lanes, which goes around the Arc de Triomphe in the center of Paris. There's some 10 streets that feed into that circle, so cars are continually zooming in and out of the circle and zipping from the center of the circle to the exterior of the circle in about 30 seconds. Pre-1980s, it was lethally dangerous. In fact, I drove in it one time, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me how to dodge all the darting cars and manage to get out of the center of the circle to the outer lanes. I'd been shoved into the center circle. I really thought I'd run out of gas before being able to leave the circle. Well, the American traffic experts took one look at this monstrous mess and suggested 2 things. Leave it to the Americans. One, they said traffic lanes. Have you ever thought of lanes? And everyone would have to stay in a lane. And 2, a speed limit. The French had never thought of this. You wouldn't believe how fast those little Citroëns and Renaults could go. Now, I would have added to these laws a lower consumption of rosé at lunch, but nobody ever asked me. Anyway, the point is that when the French started observing the new laws of using painted traffic lanes and a speed limit within it, traffic started flowing more sanely. There were fewer accidents, and everyone got where they were going with a whole lot less chaos. And that's kind of the way it is with the eternal laws. There are some self-evident principles that just help us live better lives, happier lives, more peaceful lives, less chaotic lives. For example, love is, of course, more peaceful than war. Positive thinking is healthier than negative thinking. Forgiveness helps us live healthier lives with less stress. Not stealing, killing, and revenging reduces chaos in our lives and in the world. These eternal laws help us get where we're going in life. Like traffic laws help our cars get where we're going more easily and faster. These laws reduce the law of accident. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, it says, "If anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation." The meaning of that powerful verity is that when we see the world through Christ's vision, there is a new world out there because everything just comes into focus. And we see the inherent good and the numerous possibilities that are inherent in the divine order of things. Being in Christ means being in our higher consciousness. All spiritual paths speak of this higher consciousness. It has different translations in different languages and cultures, but the truth is the same. And the best way to attain this consciousness is to put your trust in what Americans translate as God. In God, we trust. We put our trust in the divine order of things, not the man-made order. There is another way we would do well to trust in God. When we're out there in the world, stressed out or totally confused about how to proceed on a certain matter, try to remember to put your trust in God. Remember that God is omniscient, all-knowing. It's like you have access to the ultimate computer that has been programmed with every fact ever known to humans, including the history of the thinking, emotions, and actions and wisdom of every sentient being who has ever lived. Thoughts are physical things. They emit something like electricity, which is stored in the universe that some mystics call the Akashic Records. Then imagine that you search for an answer on this master computer that contains all the knowledge and wisdom in the world. The answer you would get approximates the difference between "in God we trust" and trusting instead in your single little ego that has only little tidbits by comparison. We humans have a cerebral cortex and a few decades of experience, but this can't come close to what is available to us. Would you ask a 3-year-old to guide you with a life decision? Or would you put your faith in the universal omniscience? That 3-year-old is like our individual ego. When we get quiet and center ourselves and meditate on our oneness with this omniscience, we can ask and we will receive. Maybe the answer will come in the form of a thought or an inspiration or a hunch. Maybe you remember the words of some great philosopher like Plato, Buddha, Jesus, Gandhi. Maybe everything just comes into focus all of a sudden. Just stay open. Ask and ye shall receive. In Matthew 17:20, it says the same thing, only more poetically. I tell you the truth. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible to you. Yes, ask and ye shall receive. The mountain may not be physically moved, this is poetry, but you might see that your desire to move it isn't the solution. Appreciating its beauty right where it is right now might be the solution. Norman Vincent Peale said the antidote to frustration is a calm faith, not in your own cleverness or in hard toil or work, but in God's guidance. You all know the saying that 2 minds are better than one. This is true. The 2 minds I'm talking about are your small mind, your small ego, and God's all-encompassing, omniscient mind working together as the one that they actually are. But that's a way to look at it. When you allow divine inspiration through your mind, you have a tremendous ability to live your life successfully. Why? Because you're part of that mind, all that omniscience. You quit blocking it out. You just need to trust in that. The Bible says to be renewed by the renewing of your mind. We know this at Unity. Our thinking creates our world, so let's work on our minds. All we have to do is remember that there is only one mind, and all the solutions are already there. So why wouldn't we want to get quiet and pray and do what helps us realize our oneness with that omniscient mind? When we are down, when we have a problem, we may stress out. How am I going to solve this problem? Well, I probably can't. That is your little I, your ego I, your single little Jane or Tom or Laura I. But your big I, your higher self, can. To trust in God is to have a new vision of who you are. You are not limited. You are divine. Don't accept living in the basement of your kingdom. The whole palace is yours. Just let go of your human thinking right now and realize that this very second, right now, where you are seated in here, there is a higher way. There are higher laws which regulate the universe, and you can get in sync with them. You can find answers and be guided right out of your problems. I'd like to tell you a true story about In God We Trust. Perhaps it is your story, with different details, of course. For a few of you in here, I see Anne and Katrina and a few others who are teachers. Donna, I believe. This one is my story, and I'm not particularly proud of it. I want to tell you that up front. But I hope that by telling it, it can help you. Those of you who've known me in classes, see quite a few of you in here who have, you know that while I was going through 3 years of ministerial school, I had a problem a week to deal with when I had my private time with my personal mentor. It was either a work-related, personal relationship-related, or just a life problem of not knowing what to do. That is, how to handle the problem on a spiritual level every week, 52 weeks a year for 3 years. I would state my issue during my weekly one-on-one check-in, and then my mentor would always ask me when I stated my huge problem, how do I work on this? She would always ask every week, Mary Beth, have you turned it over to God to help you see it more clearly yet? Well, every week for 3 years, yes, do the math, that's 156 weeks in a row. My answer was, oh no, I forgot. My ego is still dealing with it. Surely none of you could probably be as slow a spiritual learner as I apparently was. If any of my French students asked me 156 times who wrote Les Miserables, I would fail them for sure. I was a slow spiritual learner. I knew the spiritual facts. I read a lot of books, but I was just not remembering the wisdom that I knew. I was still trying to deal with my life, with my ego. As soon as I would turn my problem over to God, I clearly saw that I didn't have a problem. I had created the illusion of a problem. Anyway, fast forward this. Those of you who have been in my classes have heard this a number of times. I'm glad you don't have to hear it again, Matt. But fast forward to this past month, June. It's been hell for me professionally. Now, I'm not cursing in the pulpit. I mean that literally. I reached the classical biblical level of hell on earth in my teaching profession. I've taught high school French for decades, and I've never had a problem. Sure, I worked long hours, learned lots of new methods, and studied vast amounts of French literature preparing for classes, but that all just took time and perseverance. I knew what to do. Then COVID came in mid-March, right? And we had to switch to online teaching. We had 2 days to get it together and no training. But okay, I adapted. I did my best. I Zoomed with the best of them. But then summer came, and all of a sudden there are daily, this is summer vacation, you all. We aren't paid in the summer. But daily, we would receive notice of what classes and workshops and meetings were required for the day and how to teach online in case we had to go to totally online in the fall. The tech training was beyond anything I could cope with. Sure, I could do Zoom classes like we all did in the spring, but Zooming all day is boring and ineffective for adolescents. They need bells and whistles. They need French grammar video games that I had to develop myself. They need Pacman spitting out indirect object pronouns across the screen. This is technology hell for me. I figure it will take me about 2 hours per class to set it all up and grade their work online. The problem is that I have 5 different classes a day. That's 10 hours a day of prep and 8 hours a day to teach. Do the math. The weekends would be for figuring out what had to be done and learning all the technology to do it. But there were still these 18 hours a day, 5 days a week to set it all up and teach and grade. And when I attended all the online tech workshops, I could hear things like, if there are any tech people here, forgive me, this is what I heard. I don't know if this is what they said, but they would say things like, oh, that's easy, just use Flipgrid and then Loom on your OneNote app and present it on your split screen. Or just embed your Edpuzzle into Canvas on your Google Loom and then screencastify it. Now go figure, that's the answer, right, to my question. Well, for the first time in my life, I panicked professionally, and I didn't have time for a nice, nervous breakdown. And drinking isn't a spiritual option for me. The Fillmores didn't drink, I don't drink. Retiring wasn't an option either. In fact, getting advice from some wise master French teacher wasn't an option either, because no one in the country knows any more than I do how to do this. So all the classes and workshops designed to help me were just stressing me out more. Anyway, you get the picture. I felt like a one-armed man who had to operate a two-handled factory machine, or his 5 starving children at home would never eat again. So I panicked, stressed out, cried, thought of quitting on a daily basis, vociferously vocalized my frustration. In fact, I apologize officially to you all here for any answer to any of you who made the mistake in the last month of cordially asking, "Oh, how you doing, Mary Beth?" You got a long answer. I apologize. Well, I was trained and educated to teach warm bodies in a classroom. Suddenly I have to motivate, entertain, and highly educate a bunch of machines with a machine. Now, the last thing I want to do is bore you with my personal saga. I do that very seldom, as you know. The point, though, is to share a story that is perhaps an apt metaphor for problems that you might face from time to time, stressful issues of one kind or another that are thrust on you for which you truly feel incapable to handle. And for a month, I went through the hell on earth that I had created because I was convinced that I couldn't do the top job that others expected and that I expected of myself. Bottom line, I was sure that I had a job that couldn't be done, but I had to do it anyway. Does that sound familiar to anybody in any area of your life? No, I've just bored you with my story, okay? Well, Saturday, I had my monthly check-in call with my mentor. As I prepared for my 4-week tune-up, it hit me that the first question would be, "Mary Beth, have you turned the problem over to God yet so that you can see it differently?" I couldn't face it. I had forgotten. It was a professional issue, and I felt that professionally my ego could handle anything. So, I had been asked the same question hundreds of times before. I knew I'd be asked it again. How spiritually ditzy can one get, right? So, I turned the whole problem over to God and asked to see it differently after a month of crisis. Then, everything started to come into focus. I began to see what had to be done and what just couldn't be done. I didn't have time to get a PhD in computer science by August 10th. I'll just do my best. I started seeing more clearly what was really important, primarily not concentrating so much on doing a slick Tinsley job on my computer with teaching, but focusing on helping the students learn. It's a whole different focus. I saw where my ego was getting in the way. At the same time, I could see that some of the technology could help my students stay more interested and learn easier. So I was all over that. I could learn some things. But spending a week making Pokemon figures that would run all over the screen spitting out indirect object pronouns just might not be worth my time. Though my students would have been pretty impressed, right? Ego fulfillment, right? Bottom line, in God we trust means really trusting the omniscience and goodness of the universe. It's amazing how clear things can get. It's like focusing that telescope. It's like putting on reading glasses. and thus seeing better. It's like the perfect little one diagram to explain some lengthy narrative in science. Sometimes seeing things differently happens fast. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes the patience of Job, but it always happens. In God we trust. When I turned my whole professional problem over to God and asked to see it differently, I did see it differently, and it's all working out. It always does. So the takeaway for today is to truly make your commitment the American and Unity motto of "In God We Trust," and then to take it a step further. Commit to remembering this in all ways, all days. It pays. Write it on your hand. Put it on your bathroom mirror. Set your cell phone to go off once an hour to remind you, like David Kramer used to do with the Ho'oponopono prayer. Maybe choose a number. I did this in one of my spiritual schools one time, the Gurdjieff school, actually. You choose a number like 33 or 44, and every time you see that number, 33 or 44, and a phone number, an address, a car license, a price on a menu or in a store or something, let that number remind you of "In God You Trust." And then you won't suffer for a month like I did. Ask, and ye shall receive. Mostly wisdom and clarity and gratefulness. I am now grateful for my month in tech hell. I pray all the time to develop compassion and understanding. Well, now I am much more compassionate and understanding toward people who feel overwhelmed by a situation, especially their jobs. I am now grateful for my month in tech hell because it was a beautiful spiritual lesson. My prayers had been answered. I didn't expect the answer to come that way. I would have never prayed for it to come that way. But it probably came the only way I was capable of getting it. I now understand what it must be like to feel frustrated and overwhelmed by a situation that you have to deal with, but you don't think you can. Life is full of lessons and seeming problems. But if we put our trust in God, we can master them. Most of all, we can learn from them, especially forgiveness, compassion, and patience. I now have much more compassion for my students who don't always speak French correctly. And this will help me be a much better teacher than all the glitzy tech apps in the world. So this week, I ask you to commit to and be present to "In God We Trust." Take the wheel of your ship with God at the helm, and you will go in the direction of your dreams. Ask, and ye shall receive. Turn yourself, body, mind, and soul, over to the omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence that is God and that is you. Ask God to help you see your problems differently with Christ vision. And be grateful for this vision. Be grateful for this wisdom. No matter what is going on outside of you, you will no longer feel battered around by the winds of fate inside. You will feel anchored and pointed in the right direction, guided by a higher level of intelligence. And ultimately, what matters is what you gain from life in these situations in terms of spiritual wisdom. And there's always, always something to gain from any situation, no matter how horrible it seems. There is something to gain from it if you focus clearly and see it more clearly. So go out into your world this week and remember that in God you trust. Commit to it. Remember to do it. Ask and ye shall receive if you stay open to the answers. And you deserve it.